Whoa, hey. Is this new intro music to Beyond Extraordinary Radio? No, in fact, it is not. What you're listening to right now, you guys, is a commercial. Dun, dun, dun. For those of you who are worried that I've sold out to the man and that I'm auctioning off ad space to the highest bidder on my precious podcast, fear not. This is a commercial for me. And I promise not to use any fancy bells and whistles or gimmicky sound effects for this commercial, which I personally think is going to be awesome. Yeah. Beyond Extraordinary Radio and the extraordinaryintelligence.com website are brought to you by me. Many of you know that this is what I do for a living, which means that I make approximately $0 a year. What helps me get through and helps me to maintain this wonderful job that I've created for myself that I love doing so much, and so many of you out there have expressed that you enjoy it too, is the generous donations of my beautiful audience. On top of that, I do try to supplement my income in other ways. One of which is to make jewelry. It's something that I absolutely love to do, and I really do express my faith through the pieces that I create and the faith of my listeners. If you would like to support Beyond Extraordinary Radio and the extraordinaryintelligence.com website, you can run on over to my boutique, which is located at extraordinaryboutique.com. There you will find all my handmade pretties. I put a lot of love and effort into them. I use lots of semi-precious stones, and thus far the response has been great. People seem to really like the products and the care that goes into making them. If you want one, head on over to the boutique and check it out. I make new jewelry all the time. The boutique is always expanding and changing, and it surely does help me out a whole bunch. So now that I am this amazing marketing person, I'm thinking I should come up with some kind of a nickname for myself, like Nat the Jewelry Cat, Alina. It's got a pretty nice ring to it, you guys. And then maybe perhaps a jingle of some sort, like, if you want some jewelry that's very unique, go on over to Extraordinary Boutique. Boom, boom, pow. Yeah. Whoa, that was excellent.
Be on your guard. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world.
Everything out of the ordinary is to be reported.
Fiery the angels fell. Deep thunder rolled around their shores.
It may just be my imagination. Whatever it is that's watching, it's not human.
We are all now programmed for perfect happiness. Perfect happiness. Perfect happiness. Perfect happiness.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
It's a hard world for little things.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
You know, there was a time in this country when smart people were considered cool. Well, maybe not cool, but smart people did things like build ships and pyramids, and they even went to the moon.
The Great Conjunction is the end of the world! Oh, the beginning?
It was a church. Do you know that word? Yes, there were still churches when I was a child.
But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light.
You now belong to God, no longer to the devil.
What you said just now is quite extraordinary.
You're listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina.
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Yes, you are listening to Beyond Extraordinary Radio. And per usual, this is Natalina. This is a classic Beyond Extraordinary Radio interview, and I think you guys are going to be excited about it. I sure know that I was. So before we talk about the episode and who we're talking to and what we're talking about, let's cover a little bit of business, you guys. First of all, I just want to give you a big ol' shout out and a big ol' thank you for all of your prayers and support with everything that I've been going through personally, and it means ever so much to me. Also, I just want to tell you, if this is your first time listening to Beyond Extraordinary Radio, well, hello there. Thanks for listening. If you want to listen to more episodes like this, you're going to want to go to extraordinaryintelligence.com, where you can find the archives to all of my past episodes, as well as thousands of blog posts that you can read. My most recent blog post is called 500 Steps, and it's a very personal one, and I hope that it brings you some encouragement. I'm really kind of praying that a lot of people read that, because I think it's important for everybody to just really be encouraged and trust and lean on the Lord. And that's what that whole article is about. So check that out. Like I said, it's called 500 Steps. You might also want to try checking out my first installment in a new series I'm doing on on extraordinaryintelligence.com, which is called The Strange Case of. Just go to the website and click through my latest articles and you'll find all of that. If you want to connect with me on social media, you can head on over to the right-hand sidebar of extraordinaryintelligence.com, where you will find links to everything from my Facebook, which is facebook.com/beyondextraordinaryradio. You'll also find me on Twitter, which is twitter.com/extraintel. You'll find links to my various places that I can be heard online, including iTunes. If you listen via iTunes, please consider giving us a rating and review. That is amazing. There's a lot of cool reviews there, and I'm ever so humbled by it. You can also listen to us on Stitcher, and or you can just stream the show directly from the website or download it. Whatever strikes your fancy. Listen, you guys, I'm really proud that Beyond Extraordinary Radio is part of the Revelations Radio Network. And I'm also really, really excited to say that I am getting back into the swing of things and trying to go full steam ahead with both blogging and podcasting as often as I can. That is made possible by the generous donations of my listeners. Thank you guys so much. If you want to contribute to this show, feel free to go to the support tab at extraordinaryintelligence.com. There you will find a link to donate. You can do a one-time donation, or you can sign up for recurring monthly payments. Whatever you choose is amazing to me, and I'm ever so blessed by it. Also, if you would like to support the show and you'd like to support little old me and you want a little something in return, please consider going to extraordinaryboutique.com. That's extraordinaryboutique.com, where I sell all of my handmade jewelry. I've been working my fingers to the bone making brand new stuff for you guys to check out. So gosh, so many of you have stepped up and helped me out, and it's amazing. I love you guys ever so much, especially those of you who have been praying. My goodness, I feel it and I'm seeing the results of it. It is a beautiful, beautiful thing, you guys. It is amazing. I also wanted to tell you about a new project that I'm involved in with none other than Dr. Michael Heiser. It's a program called Paranormal. That's PEER. Anormal.com. And the reason it has that funky title is because the entire premise of the show is to explore things of a paranormal nature through strictly peer review research. The way it works is that Dr. Heiser will come up with a topic and he will find some articles from peer-reviewed journals, and then before the show, we will study up on all of this, and then throughout the show, we will talk about the evidence that came from these various studies in scientific settings, and then we'll just try to decide whether or not we buy it or not, if it's been proven to exist or if it's been debunked. It's a really fun, cool show. Dr. Heiser, you guys know, is really great, an amazing biblical scholar. I'm pumped to be one of the co-hosts on that show. It's also co-hosted by Trey Strickland. He hosts the Naked Bible podcast with Dr. Heiser. And then aside from the three of us, there's sort of a rotating cast of co-hosts. People like Brian Godawa have been part of it. Doug Overmeyer of CRC.com. There's Pastor Doug Van Dorn. We have had so much fun doing that show. We're 3 episodes in so far, and I think you guys are just going to really, really like it. If you like this show, if you like the work that Dr. Heiser has done through Unseen Realm and all of that, you are going to love the show Paranormal. So check it out. It's Paranormal.com. P-E-E-R-A-N-O-R-M-A-L. That's Paranormal.com. So today's show is a really fun interview I did with Dr. Aaron Judkins, and I've been following his work for a long time, and this is the first time I've had the opportunity to have him on the show and really kind of hear not just about the current project that he's working on, but just the passion that he has for what he does. You probably know Aaron from Man vs. Archaeology. He was featured in the theatrical film documentary Finding Noah, where they went on a quest to find Noah's Ark. He's been on all of your favorite podcasts like Canary Cry Radio, View from the Bunker, and now he has been on Beyond Extraordinary Radio with me. So it was really, really great to talk to him. And what really struck me is that, you know, all of this exploring that he does and all of this research that he does, it really is his passion. It really is a ministry to him. And he's witnessing to the world through the things that he finds and just the excitement that he has for biblical archaeology. His latest project is really what caught my interest, because he is planning a trip to go to the Qumran area, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in, I want to say, 1946. What you may not know is that there are caves in that system that have yet to be explored, and they got permission from the Israeli Antiquities Commission to go there for a really tiny little window, like 2 weeks at the end of this year and into 2017, to go there and see if they could find any other artifacts or perhaps any other scrolls. It goes without saying that this could have a tremendous and profound impact on what we know about history. It not only impacts those of us who are believers, but it impacts the world at large. So I really wanted to have him on to talk about this exciting project. And, you know, obviously these kinds of things are really expensive, and he has to fund all of his trip by himself. So he is doing a little fundraiser to be able to raise enough money to fly there, have a place to stay when he's there. You know, God bless him. He's got to eat some food during that 2-week window. He needs equipment, things like that. So we're going to talk about what the project entails, and then we're going to give you the opportunity to help him out if you feel led. And we're going to talk about how you can do that, and then I'll also have the links to that information inside the show notes, so you can really just, you know, pray about it and see if this is something you feel led to help out with. But regardless, it is a super duper interesting thing to hear him talk about, because he's very knowledgeable, and the things that they've already uncovered in that region is amazing. It far beyond even just the monumental find of the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's other stuff over there, you guys, that's massively important. So we are talking to Dr. Aaron Judkins today, and I am so glad that you're here to just hear this incredible information that he is going to be sharing with all of us. So without any further ado, we will get into the interview. Thank you guys so much for listening to Beyond Extraordinary Radio. I love you so very much. God bless you. And as always, if you love someone, tell them. Here we go. Around 1946, Bedouin shepherds in an area known as Qumran located a cave system filled with ancient clay jars. What lay inside these jars was a discovery with just massive historical and spiritual significance. And of course, we're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. While the scrolls and their contents really have captivated and educated us for decades and validated a lot of things that people with a Christian or a biblical worldview already knew, but it validated it to the historical and the scientific community. But what we don't know is if there's maybe even more scrolls out there just waiting to be unearthed, or other artifacts that could really be beneficial and powerful to our worldview. One man who is super interested in answering that question is Dr. Aaron Judkins. He's an archaeologist, and he's probably best known for some of his work like the recent film Finding Noah, as well as his own program Man vs. Archaeology, as well as his research trips that, they've taken him around the world, from the Middle East to Peru to right in our own American backyard. And I'm really excited because he's here today to discuss an exciting opportunity he has to excavate and explore a cave in the Qumran region that up until now has been buried and untouched, and who knows what's in there. So I'm really, really pumped to welcome the Maverick Archaeologist himself, Aaron Judkins, to Beyond Extraordinary Radio. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Natalina. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about this new project I'm going to be on.
Oh, I'm excited too. I had first seen a little bit about it that you had posted on social media, and it piqued my interest right away. You know, I followed you for a long time, but this is our first time having you on the show. I know you've been on shows with some of our colleagues, like our friend Derek Gilbert on View from the Bunker, and our buddies over at Canary Cry Radio. But I'm really excited to have you on this show because I was telling you a little bit before we started the program that I love this stuff, man. I can nerd out about archaeology, especially biblical archaeology, forever. I've learned so much interesting stuff just from your work. I've been introduced to things I didn't know about before, like the Decalogue stone and things like that. So this is really, really exciting, Aaron. But, you know, most people listening probably know who you are, but there are those in this audience that maybe have never been familiar with your work. So let's start by just having you tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you. I'm an archaeologist. I live in Texas, and you know, I have a passion like you do, Natalina, for archaeology and for history and learning about those things in the past. I like to go in the field and dig and get my hands dirty. It's one thing to research on the internet. It's another thing to go to these sites and be there and actually get to see it and do it. So that's what I do. I decided back in, a number of years ago to go on back to school and get my PhD in biblical archaeology. However, I started out in the medical field, and but I always had that passion, and so I decided I'm not getting any younger. I better go do it. And in about 2011 is when I really started kind of ramping that up. A lot of doors opened up for me. My first book was published, Alien Agenda: The Return of the Nephilim, with my co-author, Dr. Mike McDaniel, and then just a number of things began to happen. I was doing a radio show, incidentally, and a caller called in, and they asked me if I knew about the Decalogue stone, which you mentioned earlier. I didn't know anything about it, and so I began to research it, and I said, that sounds like something I need to check into. This particular site is in the deserts of New Mexico, and it is south of Albuquerque, near the village of Las Lunas, and they had found back in the 1930s, like 1933, Professor Frank Hibben found documented the very first written documentation of the Decalogue Stone. Well, what is the Decalogue Stone? That is an 80-ton boulder out in the middle of nowhere that has Paleo-Hebrew writing on it. So, I went out there and did that. But we could talk a little bit more about that. But, I ended up producing a video on that called Hidden Mountain, the Los Lunas Mystery Stone in 2012. And after numerous trips out to the site, permits, researching in the libraries of Santa Fe and Albuquerque, and talking to archaeologists and a number of people. And then in 2013, I was in a documentary video called Footprints in Stone: Forbidden History Part 2. And it talks about some of the fossil footprints around Glen Rose, Texas area. And I had been involved in that work at one time. And then in 2014, I was in Watchers 8 with L.A. Marzulli. And that's the Watcher series with him and Richard Shaw. And L.A. Marzulli asked me to go down to Peru with him and study these elongated skulls. Now, my job as an archaeologist was to strictly study 4 specific skulls that they asked me to, and to give my report about what these skulls, just the data on the skulls, what objective data I was seeing from the osteology of the skulls. So that's what I did. The report came out in LA's book, On the Trail of the Nephilim, Part 2. I wrote in in volume 1 of his book, On the Trail of the Nephilim, and then in volume 2 is my report. I also wrote the report in my journal called the Peru Expedition Journal. So it's available in both places, and then in 2013, I'll back up a year again. In 2013, I was in Finding Noah. So the film actually came out in 2015, in October 2015, and this chronicles our expedition in eastern Turkey, up Mount Ararat, searching for Noah's Ark. So there's been a lot of things that I've been able to do, and so it involves excavations around the world in the U.S. And I've just been really blessed to be able to be a part of that work. So these are the things that I've done in the past, and it's been quite a lot since that time period. But people ask me, Natalina, how do you choose what to do? I've had to turn down a lot of projects because I just simply wasn't a good fit, or there's been some other time constraints, or I just simply didn't find it interesting. But there's been several that I've had to turn down that I really wanted to do, simply because I couldn't go. This one here, though, with the Dead Sea Cave Archaeology project in 2016, this is one that I'm targeted in on. Why? Because it is such a historic, opportunity and dig, and I tried to seize those if I can. I still don't know how I'm going to get over there, but that's funny. I thought about that with Turkey too. When I got invited to go search for Noah's Ark, it was the last major scientific push for the Ark, and they said, we need you there. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to go. And the Lord opened the doors for me for that, to be able to go. So this is another project that I need some of those doors open financially for me to help me get over there, because I can't pay all the expenses out of pocket on this one. So this is part of the thing that I'm projecting for the end of the year in 2016 for a couple of weeks over in the Qumran area in Israel.
I think that is so exciting, and I don't blame you for really zeroing in on this specific topic. This place. It seems like such a monumental opportunity, and potentially having incredible historical significance depending on what you find there. Talk to us a little bit about the history of that region and, how the Dead Sea Scrolls were found and some of the things that have gone on there, and ultimately what leads us to today thinking that potentially there could be some undiscovered, archaeological finds there that would be significant.
Sure. Well, the history of this area is, like you said earlier, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 11 caves along the northwest shore of the Dead Sea between 1946 and 1956. This is an area that's about 13 miles east of Jerusalem, and it's right near the Dead Sea, so it's about 1,300 feet below sea level. It's the lowest spot on Earth. I've been to Qumran and the Dead Sea once before several years ago, not related to any of this work, but the Dead Sea is pretty cool because you can get to float in it, and it's so buoyant with the salt. They say if you take a little teaspoon of it accidentally, that it's lethal. So it's a pretty interesting area, but this is where most of the fragments of the text came out of these caves, and as you know, it is the greatest archaeological discovery of all time. Caves 1 and 11 produced most of the intact manuscripts that we have, but Cave 4 was producing about the largest amount of scrolls that were coming out to date, and we have some 15,000 fragments and about 500 manuscripts have been found, some of them completely intact, like the Great Isaiah Scroll. Scholars have identified probably the remains of 825 to 870 separate scrolls, and they have divided these scrolls into two separate categories. One is a biblical category, the other one is a non-biblical category, and because I say books, but they're in scroll forms, but these scrolls have vetted every book of the Old Testament with the exception of the book of Esther in the Old Testament scripture in the Bible. And then also apocryphal books have been found as well, like the book of Enoch. This is quite amazing that there's other works that were found as well. So multiple copies of the book of Isaiah and Deuteronomy and Psalms that was just completely intact. Now, unfortunately, before the archaeologists got there initially, the Bedouins who initially made the discovery by the two shepherd boys, there's not a lot of wood and things to burn to make their little campfires at night, and they took some of these scrolls and burned some of them for their little fire pits. Most people don't know that.
Yeah. Wow.
But the archaeologists got over there and saved everything else. Also prophecies in Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Daniel are that are not necessarily specific in the Bible. These are other accounts that are in the scrolls that are found in other scrolls. It's just amazing. Take, for instance, the Isaiah scroll is about 1,000 years older than any previously known copy of Isaiah that we have. So this is quite amazing because it actually closes a gap of some 2,000 years from present day to that day of reliability and authenticity of our Old Testament scriptures. So that's a huge impact on the Old Testament scriptures, that we can have some reliability and authentication about the text that we have had handed down to us today. So there's a lot more about the history of of these scrolls, but the most of these scrolls we think were attributed to the Essenes, who were a Jewish sect that basically broke away from Jerusalem when the Romans came in, and we think that they basically wrote the scrolls, although that's debatable in scholarship. We can't say that for sure, but certainly the Essenes were living in the Qumran community, and we think that they hid these manuscripts, scrolls, in the caves around the outbreak of the first Jewish revolt in about 70 A.D. or so, or a little prior, before Titus came in to sack Jerusalem with the Roman army. So there are just a number of caves in this area, some 30 caves that have not been excavated that we need to get to. So that's part of the reason of why we're going back.
What was the process of getting, because I know you actually have received permission from the Israeli Antiquities, the people who supervise that. What was the process of getting permission to do it? And also, gosh, I was reading a little bit of the information about it. They've given you a very tiny little window to do it, haven't they?
Yes. Typically permissions from the Israeli Antiquity Authority to excavate with a permit takes about 5 years on average. Mm-hmm. Dr. Randall Price will be heading up the Stig, and of course he was the lead archaeologist for the Qumran Plateau, which he has been the only Christian archaeologist ever allowed to excavate Qumran. He finished that work a number of years ago, so the Qumran community's been fully excavated and documented. That builds on what we did not know in the past about the Qumran area. Now we know more about that because of that work. That's part of what archaeology is supposed to do, is add to the knowledge base of what we didn't know before, either adding new information or taking old ideas and having to rethink them and into the color of the past of what we know about. And so sometimes things change as we dig up artifacts in the dirt. So what we knew prior to 1946 certainly changed in 1946 when those Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Between the next 10 years following was a tremendous archaeological a treasure. And because of that, we can now have a surety that even though some of the criticism is, well, you don't have the actual writings from Paul and Peter and all that, that may be true, but we do have writings that go back 2,000 years that have vetted everything that's been written that we know of. So it's quite fascinating that archaeology can change the course of what we know, and certainly the Dead Sea Scrolls did that. So, new excavations in this area could produce new finds, either validating what we already know or giving us new information, and that's part of why we need to go back.
Yeah, it seems to me that it would be crucial, especially if there are caves and systems that haven't been checked out yet in that specific area. I would imagine that the potential of what could be in there is just too important to just not look. I mean, if we don't look, then we just won't know. Have there been other sort of artifacts aside from the scrolls that have been unearthed in that area?
Well, yeah, sure. There have been. One of the, I think, interesting artifacts that came out of this area is one of the oldest known crowns in the world was discovered in about 1961, along with a number of other artifacts that basically is was about a 6,000-year-old crown that was found. It goes back to the Copper Age, sometime around 4000 BC. And it's just one of 400 artifacts that were recovered in one of the caves where we're going to be at. This particular crown is shaped like a ring, and it's made out of bronze, and it has some decorations like birds and things on the top of this crown. It appears that whoever owned this crown, along with these other artifacts, was somebody of huge significance, possibly a king. So the artifacts were not just bronze, but they were copper and ivory and stone, and there were 100 scepters. There were 5 crowns in total. There were tools and weapons, and it just goes back to show that these objects were hidden in these caves, and they got the 6,000-year-old date by carbon dating some of the reed mat that was found with the objects that were wrapped with the objects. So it's quite interesting when these objects come to light, and we have to ask, what are these artifacts and why were they there? Was it, was it something that they were trying to hide when the Romans came into Jerusalem? Is that, or is that an earlier cache, so to speak, from a prior group of people? We just don't know. If it goes back 6,000 years, this is way earlier than the Seans in Qumran. But who were these people? That's part of the question we still can't answer. So I think it's hugely important that, because of finds like this, we need to go back. Another important thing was the copper scroll that was discovered in Cave 3. And this scroll records a list of 64 underground hiding places throughout Israel that contain certain amounts of gold and silver and other manuscripts that are believed to be treasures from the temple at Jerusalem.
Wow. Now
that's the copper scroll. The copper scroll is huge, because this is the Jews saying, okay, we took the temple artifacts out, and you go, 25 paces this way, and then you go down this hill, and X marks the spot. That's almost how the copper scroll reads. And then you go to this other area, and they describe what they put there, how deep they bury it, how many talents of silver is there. I mean, it's very specific. So it's interesting, because the copper scroll work has been followed up on by it's a retired police detective out of Oklahoma who's really done a lot of work on this, and he thinks he's close to cracking this case about where these things are. Now, can you get over there and actually just go dig in that spot? No. Again, you got to go back and you got to get the permission and the permits to be able to do that. So I'm not sure where he's at on all that. I've never met him, but it's just interesting how this is, in the process of discovery. We just don't know if and when these temple artifacts may come back to light. So, you just have all these potential things that could come out, and with the history of this 6,000-year-old crown and these other 400 something artifacts that have come out of the cave, I think is incredible. Then you have this copper scroll that was found, and then you have the temple scroll. Now, the temple scroll was found in Cave 11. It's the longest scroll, and it records about a cave called the Cave of Columns, where they've put other things, including other manuscripts. And they specifically named the cave of columns. This particular cave at Natalina that we're going to be at has never been excavated. However, the Israelis have gone through with a very broad brush throughout most of the caves to document at least where the caves are, and they've done a temporary survey, but they've never excavated this particular cave we're going to be at. Towards the back, the roof is caved in. It's never been excavated. We don't even know what's there. But towards the back are columns. Could it be that this is the cave of columns the Temple Scroll's talking about? So if it is, could be more manuscripts, maybe other artifacts. That's the exciting part.
That is so amazing. It seems like it would just be an archaeologist's dream. Like just... It is. And that's exactly why I want to go over there, right? Because, here's Dr. Price, who was also in Finding Noah with me, Bruce Hall, who's the other archaeologist who was in Finding Noah with me. And look, Dr. Price had been excavating at Qumran before the Noah's Ark deal came up. So, after that project, he's going back over, and guess who, gets invited? It's the Maverick Archaeologist, hey, we need you to come over to help. It's a very small team because the cave is quite, it's not very large. You can't get a lot of people in there. Plus we got to dig it out from the top to the bottom. So, I'm on a very short list of people who's been invited to go. So it's an important work. I had the opportunity to go, but I need help getting there. Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of this crown right now. It is amazing. It makes me think of like Lord of the Rings or something. It looks otherworldly, doesn't it? It's so interesting.
It really is. I have a picture of that on the I think on the fundraiser site. If not, I'll put it up on the fundraiser site. But I've got a campaign going at fundraiser.com /Dead Sea Cave 2016. Fundraiser is with RAZR. So fundraiser.com /Dead Sea Cave 2016. And I'll try to put up a picture of that particular crown. And what we're talking about there. So it'll be in the updates if you want to go check it out.
Yeah, please do. And I will make sure to link to that fundraiser and any information that you have in the show notes for this show so that people can check it out. Just on a personal note, we're in a political season and that type of thing, and people are throwing their money at politicians and campaigns that probably don't really need it, you know what I mean? And I would just sort of say to the audience, look, if you want to help something that has historical, scriptural, spiritual significance potentially, really consider helping Aaron out here with this fundraiser, because I know that I would love to see people over there excavating for these artifacts that, especially just that have a biblical worldview. So there's this increased appreciation, not just from a historical standpoint and not just from a sort of secular scientific standpoint, all of that and more, because there's this biblical worldview involved. So there's an additional appreciation from a spiritual point of view of what could potentially be uncovered there. It is huge, and it's huge, I think, just as a witness to the rest of the world as we uncover these things in Qumran and elsewhere in the region. So I want my listeners to really consider, like I said, I'll put a link in the show notes. If you're able to help, this would be a really great opportunity to do so with something that I personally believe has far-reaching importance just for those of us of faith. So please check it out, you guys, and consider it and share the link and support something that I think it has importance and significance far beyond just, our present political climate and this type of thing. Aaron, I really believe in what you're doing. I'm really excited about it.
Well, thank you, Natalina. This is such a historic opportunity because once this cave gets excavated, there's no going back for season 2. This is it. and You're right. We do have a narrow window of time. Why? Because unfortunately, there's looters that have been digging in these caves that are trying to discover artifacts or scrolls and sell them on the black market. This is not only a problem in Israel, but worldwide. Even when I was in Peru, it was a huge problem. The Peruvians, government, they just don't have the resources to protect their cultural identity. That's unfortunate. The Israelis do. And they have caught thieves red-handed in these caves. Some of them they caught at customs. It's a huge problem. So they have called all hands on deck to excavate the remainder of these 30-something caves. And that way they're documented and the artifacts are documented, they're recovered. And we can add that to the knowledge bank of what we need to know about this area. So if it gets stolen away on the black market into a private collection, that information gets lost forever.
Yes.
So
because there are people out there who are just hoarders of antiquities, and they get some sort of a thrill out of just keeping this stuff in their own private collections just for themselves with very little care for the historical significance of it. It is a real problem. So
let me give you a great example of this. Some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the original scrolls, actually appeared for sale on June 1st, 1954 in the Wall Street Journal.
Oh my goodness.
And it was an advertisement, and it said something like the 4 Dead Sea Scrolls, biblical manuscripts dating back to at least 200 BC for sale. This is a great idea for a gift or for an educational or religious institution, and it gives the contact information. That's how they, originally discovered that some of these scrolls were being sold like this. So we have to do what we can to protect the antiquities, especially in this area of Qumran. I've really played my part in other projects. This is one that I believe in, I'm committed to, and I think I'm just probably the most excited about this one in particular because of this area of the Qumran area where the Dead Sea Scrolls are at. There's a huge potential for us to find other manuscripts or other artifacts, and that's the beauty, if you will, of archaeology. So that's what I like to do.
I love it. When and if you find something important in this excavation, and we keep referring to this small window, I think it's just from like December to January, right? Like this December to January, just a few weeks.
Right.
But so let's say that you find something, and then what happens? What's the process? Who kind of takes control of it from that point?
If we find something, like if we find new manuscripts, then basically what would happen, depending on the condition that they were in, say if they were not, now most of these have been found in the jars, in the clay jars, pots with lids, but some of them have not been. And the reason they've been so well protected is because the area is very dry, and it's like parts of Peru, there's just so dry, everything's intact, So now if there's a manuscript that's say in the dirt and it's fragmented and it's not in the pot, we would have to stop and call in manuscript experts to come in and carefully retain those pieces, as intact as possible, so it doesn't get mixed up with any other fragments that are not to that scroll. So that's quite important. If that happens, it would actually be a good problem, because we have found other scrolls. But basically, instead of just scooping everything out, we would just basically halt and call in the manuscript experts to come carefully remove that, document it, and then we could proceed.
You mentioned that the people involved in this project are people that you worked with on Finding Noah, like Dr. Randall Price. Are you planning on documenting this as well as you're working over there?
Oh, that's a great question, Natalina, because I would love to. But,
yeah.
Let me back up and tell you a story. When I was in Peru, I don't own camera equipment. Mm-hmm. The Hollywood team that documented Finding Noah brought all their film, that was all taken care of, which was nice. When I was in Peru, I had to borrow a GoPro camera for one of my friends. And what I didn't realize was, as a matter of fact, I had taken the same GoPro camera to Turkey, just to kind of shoot my own video and stuff. But the little micro SD card I took on top of Mount Ararat with me. You're talking 17,000 feet, minus 20 degree Fahrenheit, very cold. And so when I brought it back down to get that footage, okay, everything's there. But when I took this same SD card to Peru with me, and now it's in the heat, I filmed for about a week. It was a 64 gig card. I filmed for about a week, and that card wasn't filling up, and I thought, this is weird.
Yeah.
That's not even filling up. So I took it out, and I had Richard Shaw look at it, and I said, Richard, what's going on here? And he said, did you take this card up with you to Mount Ararat? And I said, yeah. And he said, you know what? Between the altitude and the climate change and the temperature changes, this card has been corrupted. It is just no good. And so all the footage I had filmed for a week in Peru was gone. It wasn't even there. And so I was really disheartened. We caught the problem before, Machu Picchu and a lot of the other major places that we were fixing to go to, but I lost about a week of footage. Some of that's documented in Watchers 8. So Richard had his cameras going, thankfully. Having said that, LA's got Richard Shaw, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Steve Quayle has Timothy Alberino, and I'm kind of a one-man band.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I don't have anyone helping me film and get the camera set up and with the microphones and all that. So that's just part of, I just have to do it when I can, how I can. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But hopefully I'll be able to film. I've got to get a camera,
mm-hmm.
and just little things like this, because I try not to worry about all that stuff because I'm focused on excavating. And so to have a Richard Shaw next to you, or Timothy Alberino, or somebody that's just strictly filming and that can direct it and worry about everything, and that's what I loved about Finding Noah, because I didn't have to worry about all that. It was being done. After a while, you just forget about the cameras that are in front of you, and you're just going on. So I hope to have it filmed, but how I'm going to do it, I don't know yet.
Well, I'm just going to throw this out there. If there's anybody listening who has a professional camera that they just are trying to unload, consider sending it over to Aaron Judkins. I know that there are a lot of people out there who are just, they're just looking for a place, looking for a direction to help out. That would be so awesome if you don't have necessarily the funds to donate, but you happen to have some equipment. I'm sure he would take it, and you can contact him. I'll put all of the contact information and that type of thing in the show notes. And I know that amazing things like that have happened before for other people. You know, there's just somebody out there who happens to have an extra camera laying around. Maybe they upgraded or something like that. And just send it to Aaron. You know, we would all love to have this, you know, that you would have the ability to document it so that we could kind of feel like we were there with you, you know, unearthing all of this stuff. It would be really exciting. So I'm going to put that out there too. You know, if you have a camera or you have some equipment that you think might be of benefit to Aaron, just send it over there. We'll make sure you know how to get in touch and how to do all of that. That would be really, really amazing, Aaron.
Yes.
You know, and because this is such a significant thing too, there's the additional reason for wanting to document it beyond just, you know, the potential entertainment of people like me. You know, sometimes you need to document things just for posterity or just for, you know, your own protection, you know, to make sure that you have it sort of on film what you're doing there, and in case there are any questions or anything like that. So it's kind of an important deal to have that ability, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I've often thought how I could do something like that. You know, I started Man vs. Archaeology in 2011 just with me and my cell phone camera because I was going out to these sites and I thought, well, at least I could do something. You know, that caught the attention of Discovery Channel and the Travel Channel, the American Heroes Channel. I've been in contact with even the History Channel with most of them over the last 4 to 5 years. I've had several opportunities. Several of them I declined just because it wasn't in my, you know, interest. Treasure hunting and some other things. The show on Snake Island there was another one called I don't know. It was going to be digging up people's backyards looking for bones. No, I'm not doing that. There were several others that I just declined outright, but there was a few that I wanted to do. One was a show on biblical archaeology, and then one was working towards the Man versus Archaeology concept. They asked me to go back to Turkey, and I hadn't planned on doing that, but we discussed it. But it's just not as simple as going over there. There's a lot of logistics to make something like that happen, and then the military coup happened in Turkey, as we all know, and it's just not stable over there right now. So unfortunately, a lot of these producers have great, you know, they have great ideas, but it's just all talk until something happens. You know, while we were in Peru, Richard Shaw got an email from Discovery Channel, I think it was, and it was an offer to buy the Watcher series and put it out there on mainstream, you know, television network. And I said, "That's great, Richard. What are you going to do?" And he said, "We're not doing it." And he said this publicly, and I said, "Well, you know, you're kind of taken aback a little bit, and you're thinking, wow, you're just skipping this opportunity." And he said, "Aaron, we would lose control of the Watcher series. We wouldn't have creative content control. We wouldn't have editorial control. We will lose the show. And essentially, if they wanted to kill the show, they would have every right to do so." He said, "We're not giving that up." He said, we've tapped into something that is working, and we're just doing it like this. We're just going to keep trucking along the way we're going here." So the Watcher series have been very successful. Partly because of Richard Shaw's expertise in filming. He does such a wonderful job. I told him this the last time I talked to him a month or so ago. I said, "Richard, you tell a story with the camera, and that's probably one of the best compliments you could give a filmmaker. You tell a story with the camera." I love how Richard films. The other equation of that success is L.A. Marzulli and his work in the Nephilim and his authorship from the books that he's written in the past and the current work that he does, and that made a great team in it. And they're doing, you know, some amazing work on the Watcher series. They just released Watchers 10, DNA Evidence. I make a cameo appearance in Watchers 10. back from the footage in Peru with Chase Kleske and Joe Taylor. And so Richard called me to tell me I was going to be back in Watchers 10, which is cool. But, that's been a very successful thing for them. I mentioned Steve Quayle earlier and Timothy Alberino. Those guys have teamed up to do a documentary series called True Legends. And they just released Volume 1 and Volume 2. I just ordered those and got them in and watched both of them. And stunning. They've done such a great job of telling the story and traveling to some of the very places that I've traveled to in Peru and Bolivia and Tiwanaku and Pumapunka and, all these other places. And that's the kind of team that you need. These are two examples of two-man teams. And they've directed, they've written the script, they've filmed, produced, and it's just a wonderful job that they've done. So my hat's off to them. And partly the reason I'm telling you this as an example is because Man vs. Archaeology needs something like that. If it's not going to go to the networks, then we can do it on our own.
Yep.
Right? So it just takes that person, it takes that Richard Shaw or that Timothy Alberino or somebody like that to make it happen. So I'm open to that idea and that concept, and that's part of the reason why I'm telling you that. So we can make something like in Qumran, a film, make it look really great, and that's what it needs.
Yep. And then the other danger, too, of letting some of the networks, especially someone like, the History Channel and that kind of thing, they produce really interesting content, but they always, and I'm sure you know this, they always seem very slanted in favor of like ancient astronauts and aliens and that kind of thing. And I know that's something that just from your book that you wrote, the first time, by the way, I'm jumping around a little bit, but the first time I ever heard you, I think was on View from the Bunker, I want to say, talking about your book. Gilbert. Yes, I think that was the first time I ever heard you, and I was so fascinated because you were talking also about some of your work, archaeological work with these dinosaur footprints and things like that. I thought it was so fascinating, but when you let sort of one of these corporations take control of it, especially when they seem to have an agenda to twist it or slant it, even when the History Channel takes on biblical topics, a lot of times they seem to have, you know what I mean, a bit, if nothing else, a bit of a Gnostic slant to it. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's much better if you're able to retain control of the content so that it can't be perverted.
Well, and that's what we talked about, in the past with the History Channel. So, the Discovery Channel still got an open door for me. But after, 4 or 5 years of talking with these guys, you just learn that, sometimes they'll lock you up in a year, talent agreement, and then you're locked in for a year. I missed a great opportunity with Chase Kleske and Joe Taylor on the show, and my hands were absolutely tied. I could not get out of that year agreement, and I had to wait a year for them to release me. And I think they do that sometimes to lock you up for a year so that no one else can get you, and then you're just shot yourself in the foot, sort of. So I think, some of these would be good shows. I've been open to a few of them. But, things like editorial control, executive producer roles, things like that would help retain some of the creative content would certainly help. Josh Gates' show has done very well, Expedition Unknown.
Yeah. And
this is on the Travel Channel. The Travel Channel was really looking hard at picking up Man vs. Archaeology because it was in this space, in the genre. Josh Gates has done very well. And, when you look across the networks, you think, well, how many shows are there on fishing? You got the crab guys, right? I've watched that show before. Then you have other guys out fishing and, for a tuna, and then you got the crab guys, and then you got, all this, you got all these other shows. You got shows about gold, gold hunting that okay, you got the guys going out in Alaska, and then you have other guys. There's several shows on just people looking for gold. So I was quite amazed that they didn't have a lot of shows just on different things on archaeology. And that's, I think, one of the things that we could do with Man vs. Archaeology is not just do another show like Josh Gates' show. It's very successful, and I enjoy watching that show.
I do too.
I've never met Josh, but I think our paths will cross one day. But we could do something totally different. That's, even Scott Walter's show that has been hugely successful with I can't even remember the name of the show right now. It's well, I'll think of it here in a second. I can't believe I forgot it, for crying out loud. But Scott Walter's show has done very well, and so but we can do something along the same lines, but very different.
Yeah.
Things that people don't see normally in archaeology, and that's what I hope to do. But I think you're right. It would take somebody like a Richard Shaw or somebody to come in and just do it like they do the Watcher series.
Yeah.
And certainly we could do that with our work.
I think there would have to be a market for it. You're right. These I just have a funny little anecdote about these fishing shows. Is my daddy really likes them, and he was in the hospital, and it was the only thing that really captured his interest was like this wicked tuna. And I'm telling you, if you've seen one episode, you don't really need to watch any more, because they're going to do the same thing in the next episode. There's going to be some choppy seas, and they're going to come up against some, obstacles, and then they're going to catch the fish. It happens
right.
in every episode. But I think there would be a market for a show on archaeology because there are some of these shows that are really quite popular. There's that one, what's that one where they're exploring an Oak Island?
The curse of Oak Island.
Yeah.
Yes, that's been a hugely successful show. I just remembered Scott's show, by the way. It's America Unearthed.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen.
Yeah, America Unearthed. And then the Vieira brothers had a show called The Search for the Lost Giants. I don't know if that show got canceled or not, but that seemed to be doing very well too. So you have a number of these type of shows that have captured people's attention. And, whether I do something with one of the networks or not, I told one of the producers, I was talking to her very candidly, and I just said, look, I have to be honest with you. If you think this is about me being on TV, this isn't it. Mm-hmm. I'm the wrong guy. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm out. And she said, well, what? And I said, this isn't for me. This isn't about being on TV. I've been on TV before, not in a network, with my own show, but that's not what drives me. That's not what this is about. And she said, well, what is it then? And I said, my passion is getting the information out to the people and let them make up their own minds. I don't want to, at the end of the program, be dogmatic about something and say, well, this is it, unless, there's good hard evidence for that. I said, otherwise, a lot of this archaeology that doesn't fit into mainstream, Michael Cremo came out with a book a number of years ago called Forbidden Archaeology. That's archaeology that has been swept under the rug because they didn't know what to do with it. Out of place artifacts, for example. Well, what do you do with that when it contradicts everything you've ever been taught? So I said, at the end of the day, present the evidence, let the people make up their own mind. But at least put it on the table for discussion. Yes. There should be nothing wrong with that. Academia should not have a stronghold on history and archaeology. It should be open to the people. Let the evidence speak for themselves, and it doesn't matter. But don't tell people what to believe. Show them.
Yes.
Show them, and then weigh the arguments. There's scholarship debates now about if Noah's Ark is on Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey. I don't care if it's in eastern Turkey on Mount Ararat. or if they find it on the next mountain. It doesn't matter. So I'm not dogmatic about it, but I think that it is real. I think that it exists, and that's why I went looking for it. If we don't go, we won't ever know. So someone's got to take up the challenge. Yes. Someone has to go. And I understand most people can't go, but there are times where things like this, the opportunities come around where I have to be there. Yeah. And that's the challenge with getting to Israel and Qumran, because it's not a tourist trip. This is not a vacation. I've had people tell me, well, that was a great vacation. Well, did you see the film? Did you see Finding Noah? Because there was no vacation there. That was climbing up to 17,000 feet, in winds that are 100 miles an hour. It's so miserable up there. It was so miserable. Sometimes I look back on it and I think, Aaron, how in the world did you do it? And I just didn't give up. My son told me the other day, we were out shopping for school supplies, and I said an off comment that my feet hurt or something, and I'd been walking all day, and he said, Dad, you climbed Mount Ararat and you're complaining that your feet are hurting in Walmart. And I'm like, well, wow, how did I go from there to this? It's crazy. So, well,
I imagine just the thrill of the seeking and stuff just kind of pushes you through all of that, the potential of what you might find or discover, and the excitement of it. It probably forms like a pretty good barrier to the pain of the elements and that kind of thing, when you just got to trudge through it. Of course, being from North Dakota myself, negative 20, negative 40 degree temperatures, I know that it hurts. Wow. It literally hurts your skin. And so I can't imagine adding in the crazy wind on top of it and the altitude. Oh my goodness. And the opposite of that, of course, is in Qumran, where you're going the other way. You're going below sea level.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm going to be at the lowest spot on the earth.
Yeah, I'm sure that presents a whole host of other challenges.
Well, I've never excavated there. I went to go visit one time, and I never got to climb up in the caves. I saw Cave 11 from a distance. It's so remarkable just to be there, but how great would it for me not to only get there, do the work, and not just do the work, but you come back with a film or something that, that is worthy that I can share with people, because a lot of people who follow my work, I want to take them on the journey with me. And that's the great story about Finding Noah. It's about the journey, not necessarily the destination. The Peru film that I actually did was about, on the trail across Peru and Bolivia. And, I talk about, some of these sites on site at Puma Punka. I told Chase Kleski, I said, Chase, I'm looking for these huge H blocks that you see on Ancient Aliens. I'm looking for 7-8 foot H blocks, and they're not that tall. They're knee high or waist high. And then when you see them on Ancient Aliens, you think these things are huge. They're 7 or 8 foot. No, they're knee high or even waist high. And I told Chase, I said, look at these H blocks. Look how small they are. I was expecting huge H blocks, but the way they present it is huge and larger than life. That's not the way it is in reality. That these were laid down for a runway. It's absolutely. It's I don't know. It's comical, I guess, in a way, because archaeologists are back there going, these guys, what are these guys saying? Why are they equating archaeology with this? I was in Chaco area, the Chaco Canyon area in North New Mexico. This is one of the top 10 archaeological sites in the country, the Chaco Canyon, the Chaco culture. And I was inside, and one of the rangers I was talking to, and I heard them over talking about the Ancient Alien program coming in and filming, and I've watched that show several times. Matter of fact, I watched quite a bit of it so I could so I could figure out what it was all about. And I said, what did you guys think when that episode aired and they were talking about the kivas at Chaco Canyon actually being, some kind of, underground dome where they showed this dome covering it like a biodome or something. And she just rolled her eyes. She said, we didn't know they were going to do that. And they were quite upset about it. I've never met, any of those guys from there. But none of those guys are archaeologists. Mm-hmm. And is it entertaining program? I would say yes. That's why probably people watch it. I've watched it. But is it historical fact and truth based in archaeology? No. And that's where I differ from that viewpoint. So, I'm not bashing them. I'm not saying anything negative towards them, but I just say simply that I disagree with the premise that this is proving to be ancient astronauts. So, or the ancient Nephilim, or the ancient astronaut theory, which is what they purport. So there's a huge difference, and that part of that, when I was in Peru and Bolivia, is to actually give some very straightforward answers in archaeology about what these sites represent and how they got there. We don't know everything there is to know about it. No. How do they move 100-ton stones into place and with oblique angles? And one stone I was looking at there at Sacsayhuaman in Cusco, Peru, it was a stone that has 12 different sides to it, 12 different angles. Some of them 45-degree angles, very oblique. How did they get that stone in position with 12 different angles? How do they do it? Well, we don't know. We really don't know. There's a lot of theories out there. I'm just saying that personally I disagree with the ancient astronaut theory. But look, I've rubbed shoulders with several of the people that are in that field, although not directly with ancient aliens, but people who know a lot of those people over there. So is it something that that I believe in personally, that archaeology proves to be the case? Absolutely not. And that's, I think, the difference of what I bring is, let's get into the field and let's see what the evidence is actually showing us.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really valuable because, obviously the crew from Ancient Aliens, they have been notorious, even in the examples that you gave, about, we'll say, twisting, or if we want to be a little more generous, maybe just sensationalizing some of the things that they come upon. And I think, we'll take the secular world. They might be tempted to think that someone who is a Christian would do the same thing, skew the facts, sensationalize things to present a case that, sort of supports that worldview. But what is really beneficial is if you can have someone who is just interested in the facts, who is just interested in observing things as they are and examining them and presenting them as they are, whatever the results may be. I think that's also just beneficial it's a beneficial witness, just that we are out there looking for facts just like everybody else is. And, if they happen to, if the things that are uncovered happen to support the biblical worldview, then that's a wonderful witness. But, it's just a matter of how you approach it, and you're not sensationalizing it, because then you lose some credibility. And I found that in your work, you just sort of show what you found and discuss it with the available information. And, gosh, that's just the best way to do it, because I think that as Christians, we do sort of have this stigma, and maybe some of it is deserved. I'm sure that there have been people in the past who have tried to take on some of this historical stuff and have sensationalized it or skewed it more in our favor than maybe was really there. So, to have, and actually, as we were talking about this, I thought about, we're kind of entering a time where there is now platforms available for Christians in television and that type of thing that maybe even is more friendly. I'm thinking Skywatch, and things like that.
Sure.
Maybe there's a place for Man versus Archaeology in that arena. But what's really cool is that you're not so entrenched in your particular worldview that you won't work with people who maybe don't share it. You mentioned Chase, for example. She's a wonderful gal. I've talked to her. She is so sweet, and she's actually we've talked about having her on the show too to talk about some cool stuff. But
Sure.
I think that's important too, don't you? To just kind of like reach across the aisle and say we're all. That you mentioned, that academia doesn't own history, and I think that's a really good point. I mean, this is our history. We are all owners of this, and we should all have access.
That's a great point, because I have reached across the aisle, so to speak, to do work. Chase Kleski is a dear friend of mine. I worked with her in Peru on Watchers 8, and she's been on my radio show back when I was doing my radio show on IRN, and she's had me on her show on Fate Magazine, and let's use the example of the Peruvian elongated skulls. I personally have a theory about the Nephilim. I wrote a book on it in 2011 called Alien Agenda, The Return of the Nephilim. But does that mean I believe in aliens? No.
Right.
And I've had to tell pastors that and some other people, well, your book's about aliens. No, it is not. You've never read my book, so you don't know. But if you did, you would know exactly what the book was about. The book is refuting the ancient astronaut theory and the cosmic evolutionary theory. And where we're headed with all this. That's why I subtitled it The Return of the Nephilim. Why? Because I do believe that the Nephilim, the giants of old, the men of renown in Genesis 6, did exist. I believe we have ample evidence for them in archaeology. I believe that they did come back in a second incursion. We see them back in Numbers 13:33 that they were back in the land. And there was different races of giants, the Rephaim, the Anakim, the Zazumans, and a number of other races that we see. They are preoccupying the land where Israel is supposed to be, right? They're there for a reason. Why? They are to thwart the coming people of Israel to prevent them from taking the land. There's a meaning behind this. And these aren't just guys that are tall. Some people say they're intellectual giants. They're just smarter. No, because the Bible says it gives their heights in cubits. They had 6 fingers and 6 toes, 24 digits. They had double rows of teeth, and they had an evil spirit about them. There was something very, very different with the Nephilim. I believe that, again, the Nephilim will return. And that's part of what the book's about. So, is it wild? Yes, because we don't get that in church. They don't teach you that stuff. It's too fringy.
Yeah.
But look, we have to go back in the past to realize what's coming down the pike in Revelation. As in the days of Noah were, so shall it be again. Let me tell you, those things that happened back in those days, it's going to be much, much worse when all this gets broken open, when Armageddon hits and Revelation is broken wide open and those locusts come out of the bottomless pit. And there's things that are happening that we would say supernatural that transform into a physicality on this earth. The Bible says even the very elect would be deceived because of these things. We have to be vigilant about our Christianity and about our faith. We can't just be sitting on the pews warming the bench. We can't be on the sidelines anymore. I heard one pastor say, get off your blessed assurance and do something. I kind of like that because I I like to be a part of something that's greater than myself. I like to put words into action. And look, I try to do what I can, where I can, with the gifts that I've been given and the talents that I have, to move forward with what I'm supposed to do here on this earth. It's called destiny. And that's what I think my destiny is about, is to go forth and look. If we ever found Noah's Ark, what would that do? What would that change? People say, well, what does it matter? It matters because if we can physically document it, and we can empirically, scientifically, independently say there's a structure up there, and it fits all the dimensions given in Scripture, doesn't have a sign that says the USS Noah's Ark, but it fits all the dimensions. It's right where it's supposed to be. It has room where all these animals were in. If we could verify a superstructure, wherever that superstructure is, such as Noah's Ark, it should change everything we know. It would validate the historical accounts in Genesis all the way through, and that would either take people's faith and embolden it and say, I never had to see it anyway, I believed it, but thank God it just emboldens my faith, right? Mm-hmm. And then you would have another camp of people that doesn't believe, and they would say, wow, they found that thing up there. Now I'm going to have to make up my mind what I'm going to believe about all this. Then you're going to have some that are in the middle, that no matter what you find, no matter what evidence you bring forth, it will never, ever change their mind. Why? Because their mind is already made up, and they don't care what you find. They'll explain it away. They'll discredit it. They'll hide it. They'll lock it in a basement. They'll protect it in academia where you can't access it or reach it anymore, not even to discuss it. It's gone. Why? Because they don't want the information out. But a find such as Noah's Ark would change everything we know.
Yeah. Finds
in the Qumran area that would add to what we already know or give us new information is extremely important, because it's a convergence of evidence. I like Tim Mahoney's film Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus. I was blown away when I saw that film, because it puts it in such a simple story to understand, where you can follow it, where the layperson can understand the timeline. The Egyptian history timeline is so tangled up, but the way he's got it on the wall and the way he explains the stories and the evidence that has come forth, that archaeologists know very well that the ancient Hebrews were in Egypt. There's ample evidence for this, and it's now documented. That to ignore that evidence is to willfully ignore it. To willfully ignore it. That's something totally different when you willfully ignore evidence. Archaeologists know where Mount Sinai is, the real one, and they've known it for a long time. Archaeologists know that the Hebrews have been in Egypt. Archaeologists know that there is the Exodus, and where the Exodus happened and the route that they took, and there's still archaeological evidence that's documented by the Caldwells that were over in Saudi Arabia. A convergence of evidence. You have Noah's Ark, you have the Exodus, you have Mount Sinai, and you have Noah's Ark. Then you have the Dead Sea Scrolls to cap it all off. That convergence of evidence is so powerful that once all these come together, if you still don't believe, then, that's a willful ignorance of the evidence. I'm not, I tell people all the time when I go speak, I don't care about changing your mind. I'm not here to change your mind or to make you believe what I believe. I'm here to simply show the evidence. It's up to you to do the rest. So I think that's why it's so important for me to present evidence where I can, when I can, to the people, and just let them make up their own mind. The footprints are a great example about that. I told one guy who was in a well-known ministry, and he said, I don't believe in those tracks and blah, blah. I said, I don't care. I really don't care. Why? Because it doesn't matter that I'm trying to convince you. I simply put the evidence on the table, and then, look, I'll let you make up your mind. If you don't want to use it, fine. But for some, it is evidence. For others, it's not. I think it's important that we actually bring it forth and let people make up their own mind about it. That's why this is so important in Qumran, to be able to go and do this work, this historical work, because once this cave is excavated, it's done. There's no season 2 to go back to. So that's part of what I do. I think that's, in a synopsis, that's, I think, the importance of the work. And again, it's really an honor for me to be able to go out and do this.
As I'm listening to you speak with such passion about this, it strikes me that, you're not just a personality, you're not just an archaeologist or even just a biblical archaeologist. Aaron, it strikes me that this is your ministry. This is the calling that the Lord has given you, and you are ministering to not just believers, but to the world through the things that you find and that you're attempting to find. And it's really touching to my heart, just the passion that you're clearly displaying. So as we wrap this episode up, Aaron, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I want you to just take this last opportunity to talk about the importance not just of this expedition to Qumran, but the importance of, talk about the fundraiser, and then tell us also where the audience can find you online if they want to learn more about this particular expedition and just what you are up to in general.
Yeah, sure. My next speaking engagement is going to be in Lubbock, Texas. This weekend. It's going to be August the 19th and 20th in Lubbock. So if you go to my Facebook page, you can go to Facebook, and either you can go to Aaron Judkins and the number 1. That's my personal Facebook page. I have it up there. Or you can go to Facebook.com and then go to Man vs. Archaeology. And, that's all the archaeology stuff that I put goes to that Facebook page. The central hub for everything, if you get lost in cyberspace, just go to my website, aaronjudkins.com. I have all the social media connected there. I have the fundraiser campaign, so you can donate to this cause. And if you want to go specifically to the fundraiser site, it is fundraiser, and razor is spelled R-A-Z-R, fundraiser.com /Dead Sea Cave 2016. Dead Sea Cave 2016. You can look on there and see how much has been given and how long the campaign is. I do got some perks on the campaign that for different levels of donation that you get. I may be changing some of those perks up or adding some additional perks to that as well. And then the fundraiser site. So this is pretty much we'll get you to where you can follow me online and on Facebook and a number of other things, and come to Lubbock and hear the other speakers as well. It's going to be extraordinary time of hearing these speakers, and I'll be there. I have some copies of Finding Noah and some of my other books with me. So I hope to see you there. Look forward to meeting everyone at the conference.
That sounds wonderful. And I'm going to take, I'll go through and take all of those links and pop them into the show notes so that people can, from the extraordinaryintelligence.com site, easily access your stuff. And I pray that people do check it all out. Aaron, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope that we can do this again sometime after your excavation and talk about all of the cool stuff you found.
Oh, I'd be glad to come back on and talk about it. Thank you for having me on the program today. It's been very rewarding to talk about these things. And as you mentioned, this is such a passion for mine. I can easily talk about it for a long time. So, an hour and a half show goes by pretty quick for me. But thank you all for following my work and for your support. Look, without your support, I just can't get there. Thank you for making it happen, and for following me and supporting all my work. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Aaron Judkins, and we will talk to you again soon. God bless.
You've been listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina. For the latest headlines and program schedule, please visit extraordinaryintelligence.com.